Hola, Oakland! All right, we need a lot of energy, but of course, first we have to start with a selfie. So, on the count of 3, give it up, Oakland. 1, 2, 3. Hola! All right. Thank you so much for having me. This is a real treat. My name is Wolfe Pereira, and I'm here to talk to you about achieving escape velocity in your career. So, quick show of hands. Who here is a millennial? Raise your hand. All right, we got easily more than 60% of the audience being millennials. Sadly, I am no longer a millennial. I've aged out. I'm old, but I'm not this old. But I am older, and I think it's really important to take the time to think about the impact that you will have over the arc of your career. Because at some point, all of us will be that old. And you'll have to look in the mirror and think about what impact have you had with your time. And I love the word impact. It's a very powerful concept. And when I think about who has had the most impact on me growing up, I think about my parents. Like most of us, your mom and dad probably had some of the most important impact on your life. And so these are my folks. They had a huge amount of impact in lots of different ways. One way was having impact maybe on like Halloween costumes. This is me. I will not be a mariachi singer for Halloween this year. But they also had impact in teaching really valuable lessons. And one of the most important lessons was teaching me to ask the question, how can I help? And when you think about that, that is actually one of the key questions to ask in life. I learned that, how can I help, to ask to my family, my community, and I've carried that with me in the workplace, with my team, and with my company. And when you take a step back, I also learned that this was an incredible principle that my parents taught to me, but unfortunately my parents are no longer with me. My dad passed away 6 years ago, and actually be almost the 1-year anniversary of my mother passing. She passed last November. And so I learned another lesson, that life is short. And when you really think about impact, these are the kind of things that really matter. What did you learn from your parents, from those around you? How did they help you, and how are you helping others? So when you think about it, impact is where I spend a lot of my time. This is my son, Sebastian. He's 2 years old, and I have a baby girl on the way. My wife is pregnant. We're having a daughter in January. Super excited. She's doing all the work. I'm not doing that much. It's all my wife. But I think about the impact that I could have in his life, and what am I going to teach him? And so life truly is about impact. And so often we're focused on all this day-to-day BS, but we forget where is it that we really want to go? What do we want to do with our time? What kind of impact do we want to have in life? And so I invite all of you to think about that today is day one. Every day that you wake up is actually day one. And when you think about it, this is exactly the kind of thinking that led to Jeff Bezos starting Amazon. You know, Jeff Bezos had something called the regret minimization framework, a really fancy term to basically talk about, hey, in X number of years, will I regret not doing this thing, whatever this is? And if the answer is yes, you should go do it. If the answer is no, don't do it. Pretty simple framework. But he used this framework to answer a key question because he was at a hedge fund making a lot of money in New York, and he was successful, but he wasn't fulfilled. He didn't feel like he was having impact. And so this is a very powerful framework for you to think about how to have impact in life. Not just your personal life, but also your professional life. And that's what I'll talk to you about today. When you think about it, there really is no playbook for your career. Everyone has a playbook, whether it's in sports and all these different fields. But when it comes to your career, there truly is no playbook. And I found that frustrating. When I was, kind of entering the workforce, I thought I was going to find a Yoda. I'm going to find this wise old person who's going to teach me everything. Guess what? There was no Yoda. It was a very sad moment. But understanding the power of impact, you actually don't have that much time. There are a core number of years that you can have impact. And the sooner that you realize how to have the most amount of impact in the earliest part of your career, the higher the loft that you have to actually achieve what I call escape velocity. So what is escape velocity? Let's have a little refresher. This is a term that's used in physics. The minimum speed needed for an object to break free from the gravitational attraction of a massive body. That's a great concept for physics. It's also a great concept for your career. But let's just change some of the words. Let's move object to you. And the massive body, well, it depends. What's holding you back? Maybe it's your company. Where you are today could potentially be holding you back from having impact and achieving escape velocity. Maybe it's the haters. A lot of haters out there. Haters are going to hate. But guess what? Maybe it's you. Maybe it's your ego. Little comic book reference there for those geeks out there. Represent. Maybe your ego is holding you back. And when you think about it, if it's all about impact, you need to think about how you have to be 100% accountable for your actions. The only thing that you could control is you. So control that controllable, control you. What does that mean? You need to really be accountable for how you define yourself. So take a step back, come back to impact. I think about the course of my 20+ years in business. I started my career in finance thanks to this wonderful program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, and I would not be here today if it was not for SEO. But that started me in finance, but that was not where my passion was. That's not where I wanted to have impact. And eventually I worked in technology, I worked in media, and today I'm the Chief Marketing Communications Officer for an amazing AI, artificial intelligence technology company called Quantcast, where we're trying to help unlock creativity and help brands grow in this AI era that's upon us. But if you think about it, it was very clear, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was defining the job. I did not let the job define me. Think about that. You get to define the job. Don't let the job define you. When you think about this playbook, I want everyone here to think about how are you achieving escape velocity? What do you do in these impact years? Think about your 20s. For all those millennials that were in the audience, your 20s are really the work hard years. Guess what? These are the years where you want to get that first opportunity. You want to work really hard. You want to get recognized. That's the key in your 20s. Doesn't matter what it is. Get the opportunity. And while you're at it, get someone to advise you on the things that you should be doing to unlock your potential. Get some mentors that can actually confide and you could tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly too. It's really important just to kind of work hard and make sure that you actually have someone giving you good counsel. But then you get to your 30s. And this is actually where a lot of people start to go sideways in their careers. Maybe you're going sideways right now. I think of this as the Bermuda Triangle years, right? Because again, there's no playbook. So how do you break out? How do you have impact? How are you achieving escape velocity? There's no Yoda. These are the really hard years, and they make or break careers. And so when you think about it, you've been now working in an office for a long time, and now it may appear that you're actually like in that TV show, The Office. It's kind of depressing. Time to make the donuts. You're just going through the same routine. But this is actually critical, because in your 30s, you go from being a generalist, and you actually need to develop a discipline, a specialty. You need to become the expert in whatever it is that you're doing. No one really tells you that. You need to go from realizing that your work, of course, matters. But guess what? Your relationships matter more. This is now where you start to see people start to rise in the organization. Why? Because they have the right relationships. They have the right connections. This is actually where either women or professionals of color start to go sideways. Why? Because they don't have these relationships. And you need to stop only focusing on a mentor, but you need to find a sponsor. There's a very, very successful woman in Wall Street. Her name is Carla Harris, and she wrote this book, Expect to Win. And she talks about the difference between an advisor, a mentor, and a sponsor. And as Carla would say it, the sponsor is who you tell the good, and the good to. Because guess what? You need to have a champion. In the room where it happens, when the doors are closed, who is there championing you? You need to have a sponsor. Most people don't tell you that. And then, if you make it out of the Bermuda Triangle, you get to your 40s and beyond, where I am, these are the work smart years. Guess what? This is actually where you go from being that specialist to go and be a generalist again. It's kind of weird how you actually have this cycle, because now you need to be able to manage lots of different things, lots of different people, lots of different disciplines. You need to understand that it's not who you know, it shifts to who knows you. And you now need to pay it forward. Not only do you need a sponsor, you now need to become a sponsor. So remember, define the job, don't let the job define you. And when you think about this job, this is where I think it's really important that everyone is always a business person first, but you need to think about this as your craft. Your job function is your craft. Are you the expert in it? Are you the best there is? Whatever that is. And when you think about the C-suite, there's internal and external types of roles, different types of focus. But the reality is the CEO, the chief executive officer, well, what is the function of an executive? It's kind of vague. What's the job description of an executive? There really is none. They're that general manager. But everyone that reports to that CEO, that is a function. That is a craft. And lots of folks, when they're going sideways, part of it is because they are not the expert in their craft. They're dabbling. How many of you are actually doing a little bit of maybe sales, a little bit of marketing, maybe a little bit of product? You don't really have a clearly defined role. So I would argue that you need to master your craft. And after many kind of fits and starts, I realized that marketing was my craft. I loved marketing. And so I dedicated myself to it. And when you learn marketing, you learn about the 4 Ps of product and promotion and place and price. But I would argue that there's actually a 5th P. And this 5th P is really starting with purpose. And I think that everyone needs to have purpose in life. It comes back to impact. How are you truly making an impact? It has to start with purpose. And so this is a very powerful lens to not just think about it from a marketing perspective, but bring it back to your career. How are you achieving escape velocity? This is a great lens for you to look at the arc of your career. The impact years. How are you thinking about the keys to liftoff so you achieve escape velocity? So let's talk about these through that lens. First is purpose. Who here has heard of Simon Sinek and start with why? I see some show of hands. Please watch this video. This is actually one of the top 3 TED Talks of all time. Simon is an incredible speaker. He does incredible talks, and I actually had the privilege to interview him last week because I'm on the board of directors of the Ad Council, and we had a great conversation around purpose. And so I'm a purpose-driven marketer, and my purpose is truly to inspire people to ignite their true potential. That's what I want for everyone in this room and everyone listening to this TED Talk. But when you think about it, your why is really what you believe. Your how is kind of how you go about it, the process, and the what, those are the results, but it has to start with why. That has to be your core. And so when you think about it, your why is another way of saying, what do you stand for? And so when you apply this to your career, think about it. If you ask who this is, Elon Musk, do you know what he stands for? I think you would. If someone were to ask MLK, do you know what he stood for? I think you would know the answer. So the question is, when you are in your job, when you are in your corporate environment, do people know what you stand for? What is your purpose? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? You need to have a very strong why. Once you define that purpose, then you can now answer the other 4 Ps. But again, apply them to you. So instead of product, I would argue that this is your superpower. That is your product. When you show up day in and day out to the office, what is your superpower? And I love superheroes, right? Again, comic book nerd, full disclosure. So I believe that everyone has a superpower. What's my superpower? I'm a connector. I love to connect people. I always find interesting ways to either connect people internally or clients and partners, but I want to connect people. I love that human endeavor of seeing when people are able to actually make that connection in real time. But what is your superpower? You could have left brain skills, right brain skills, whatever it is, but everyone has a superpower. You should know what your superpower is. And then you should focus on it. One of the worst things to do is actually do everything, because then you actually are doing nothing. So really focus on what your superpower is, because your focus will determine your reality. And that ties to your purpose. So we spoke about mastering your craft. Guess what? Your superpower, then you get to apply it to your discipline, to your craft. And once you have your purpose, once you have your superpower, and you apply it to your lane, to your job function, to your craft, now things are going to start moving for you. So now we spoke about that, purpose, product. Now let's talk about promotion, or what some people call the brand. Brands matter more than ever. And when you think about it, brands are a really powerful filter to understand the world. And there's a very famous book called The Love Marks Effect, written by a creative agency, Saatchi & Saatchi, and they talk about this 2x2 matrix with love on the x-axis and Y has respect on the, as the y-axis. And everyone always wants to be in that upper right-hand corner, high love and high respect. And so when you think about it from a consumer perspective, well, what would fit into that high love, high respect category? I will make sacrifices before I give this up. For me, I love Apple products. It's so cliche, but I couldn't live without my iPhone. I couldn't live without my Mac. I love Apple products. But what would that be for you as a consumer? You get to answer that question, but now let's flip it. When you think about the things that go into respect, the performance, the trust, the reputation, the things that go into love, the mystery, the sensuality, the intimacy, what if you are the brand? When you show up to work every day, guess what? You are a brand. And so my question to you is, where would you score? And what quadrant would you be? Where would your team score you? Where would your company score you? Where would your industry score you? It's a really powerful exercise to view yourself as a brand through this lens. I would argue that brands matter so much, and there is a very powerful perception tied to each brand. There is actually a perception gap that people have. Because you might think you're awesome, but guess what? Maybe not everyone else does. Ever happen? You ever see that person that comes in and they think they're all fly, and guess what? Oh, that person, he thinks he's all that, but he's really not. That's a perception gap. And so what do people say about you when you are not in the room? One would argue that's actually the real power of the brand. That's what the brand really stands for. But again, there are a whole bunch of labels. And these are just kind of very generic labels, how someone would describe you. But maybe these are some other labels that people use to describe you. How are you taking control of your brand? What do people say about you when you're not in the room? How do you show up? What is that gap in perception? So language is critical, and language becomes reality. So the language that you use to describe yourself is critical so that everyone else knows what your purpose is, what your superpower is, and what your brand is. Because your reputation truly is your most important asset. And another way to say that is your brand is your most important asset. So we spoke about purpose, product, and promotion. Now let's talk about place. Or in terms of the escape velocity framework, talking about your voice. Voice is another way of saying having a point of view. It's so often that people do not share their point of view. And I make it very, very active effort to always share my point of view. Whether I'm writing something, whether it's my own blog, whether I kind of do an op-ed somewhere, or even it's just a tweet. But those are all examples of you sharing your voice. And guess what? Having a voice is really powerful. But what happens sometimes? Sometimes you don't show up. Sometimes you have no voice. You're just furniture. No one wants to be furniture. I have a no furniture rule on my team. If you are on my team and if you're in a meeting and if you don't talk, well, why are you in the meeting? Right? Not there to take notes. It's not entertainment to have some popcorn and watch the meeting. You need to be on the court. How are you participating? Don't be furniture. Share your perspective. Share your voice. Your voice matters. If people don't know what you stand for, if people don't know what you're thinking, then how are you ever going to achieve escape velocity in your career? Share your voice. And this isn't about an introvert or an extrovert. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, why am I talking? Maybe more people need to ask that. But the reality is, you have a point of view. Share your point of view in whatever authentic way you can. And lastly, let's talk about price. In marketing, this is about a value exchange. I'm going to give you money, and you're going to give me something. There is a value exchange. That's the price of that transaction. But I would argue that business is truly about people. My old boss, the CEO of Akamai, Paul Sagan, would always drill that into my head. Stephen, business is about people. And so think about that. Business is about people. And so when you are talking about the business of people, people won't care how much you know until they truly know how much you care. Stand in their pain. This is about empathy. This is about understanding the empathy of your team, of your clients, of your partners. How often have you had someone come into the office, hey, how you doing? All right, that's great. And they just keep on walking, right? Like you didn't even get to answer. They just said, all right, and they just keep walking. You need to care. And one of the most important questions to understand that everyone is on a journey, I would argue, is to ask HCIH, how can I help? Start with asking, how can I help? And you will be surprised at the response that you get. And actively listen. Don't think that you have the answer. Just truly ask, hey, how can I help? And then shut up. And it's very powerful to see the response because everyone is on a journey. Everyone needs help in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your team, whether it's your client, whether it's your partner, whether it's your CEO, or whether it's the janitor. Everyone needs help. And when you have that mentality, it really changes the relationship. And all those things together are ways that you could truly break out in these impact years. And the earlier that you start thinking about that, the more loft you'll have in achieving breakout, achieving escape velocity. And one of the best parts about it is once you start doing it over and over again, you're going to have one of the best gifts, which will be gratitude. Because again, business is about people, and people will want to help you. People want to give back. Because if you're out there constantly saying, how can I help? How can I help? Guess what? One day, you will need help, and they will be there to help you. So these are the 5 keys. Please, please incorporate them so that you can achieve escape velocity. Master these keys for liftoff. Don't let the job define you. You define the job. Be true to your craft. And please be inspired and ignite your true potential. You have one shot to truly have impact in this life. I hope that you take it. Thank you.